Hello, and welcome to an episode of the CAS podcast brought to you by ColDesi. My name is Marc Vila, and today we're going to be talking about choosing the right direct-to-film or DTF printer. And the subtitle is A Practical Guide for Professionals and Beginners too. And what's this all about, right? It's an important decision that you're potentially in the process of making or you're thinking about making, investing in a printer for your business. It's the livelihood of your business. It's what makes money. This is what prints money, right? Is these direct to film printers are what you're going to create you're going to create an output that you're going to deliver to your customers. It's very important to pick the right one. If you pick the wrong printer, for one, you could potentially just be down and out of money, which is worst case scenario. You could produce something that's significantly too slow for your business. You don't have proper amount of production to really keep going, something that's not large enough. All of these different things are going to be considerations that we're going to cover today. And the first thing that we're going to dive into is the size of the printers. But before we get into that, I will say at the end of the episode, I'm going to have a small little section. We'll have just for beginners and just for professionals on some key decision-making tips after everything else that I've said. So we'll cover that at the end. So for everything else, this is going to be for just about everybody. So whether you have whether you're a startup, you have a small production shop, you've got a decent size shop with maybe 30, 50 plus employees, or you have a large facility. This is all going to be great information, especially if you're just starting to dive into the world of direct to film printing. So I'm going to make a few assumptions right away. I'm going to assume that you know what direct-to-film printing is at this point in time. You at least have an idea that we're printing t-shirt transfers in so many words, and that you're a business owner at this time. If you're not, there's obviously some things you're going to have to do ahead of time, but otherwise we're here to choose a printer. And that's what this is all about. So let's start with size, as I mentioned. Now, you can purchase these printers in various sizes, just like anything else. They start with ultra compact little desktop things, letter size, 8.5 by 11 type of printers. They don't do very much production at all. And these are things you could buy in about 1 million different online stores nowadays. And the next size up, that's really a hobbyist. That's really only for hobbyists. I would not, if you're planning on selling, that's not a direction you're going to want to go. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we move up to the A3 size, right? So this is approximately like an 11 by 17, right? Two of those 8.5 by 11 type of sheets. So it's a larger sheet. And this is a sheet printer. And there's some other larger ones that I've seen around as well. So these are going to be single use, like single transfer type of prints. You're going to print one and you go through the process one at a time. As we move up from there, we start getting into the roll-to-roll printers. These are all-in-one solutions. And again, we'll dive deeper into what that means. And this is typically going to be a 12, 13-inch type of a size. Then the next popular is moving up to a 24-inch width, by the way, width of the size of the printer, and then up to a 30-inch. And I've seen some other larger things out there, but not really in mass production, not really very popular. The most popular sizes you're going to be seeing are going to be the A3, the letter, of course, for the hobbyist, the 12, 13-inch, the 24, and then now the 30 is becoming more popular, and we're seeing it out there. So those are the different sizes you're going to get. Obviously, the wider the printer, the more production you're going to be able to do, and that's a key consideration. The number one consideration of all of this is less the size of the print, because for the most part, 99% of t-shirts that are printed out there will print on just about any one of those size printers, right? Most of the time we're getting like a left chest logo like you see here, or a full front, which is 8 by 10 or a 10 by 10, and then backs as well. So that the size consideration is generally less about the actual size that you can print and more about how many you're going to be printing as you're rolling in through production. If you do need those super extra large prints, then because you're doing 4x X size t-shirts typically, then naturally you're going to need the larger size printer to really be production friendly. Now that we've talked about sizes, we'll talk about the type of ink system that you can have. So there's essentially two types of systems we're going to see. There's going to be bulk ink and cartridge. And if you know about printing, you've probably seen this before in other systems like direct to garment printers and even some paper type of printers are doing bulk ink and cartridge as well. And there's really a benefit for each of them. The benefit for the bulk ink system is, generally speaking, the ink cost is lower. You can buy ink by the half liter or quarter liter or liter. They're just coming in bottles. There's no production facility happening where people are inserting it into bags like a cartridge-based system would have, or inserting it into cartridges. You're not having any type of degassing, which is removing oxygen and other gaseous particles out of the ink. There's usually less filtering and things like that. So those all take a little bit of time to do, plus the costs of the cartridge and or the bag. And that's the two types of systems you're going to see. When we talk about cartridges, I'll also kind of talk about bags and cartridges at the same time, because really there's a bag inside of a cartridge, right? And these systems are superior because of it's cleaner in so many words, to put it simply, right? And what I mean about that is we're not opening bottles and pouring things into an open system. Every time you open and close that system, an ink system, you introduce something into it, right? The air is full of particulate, especially if you're in a large warehouse. There's going to be more particulate in that area, depending on what type of weather conditions or where you are in the country. Every time you open and close things, you introduce particulate. You're also drying out the system too, right? You open it up, we lose moisture or we add moisture in. So that system is never a perfect system 100% of the time. There's always a little bit of flux when we're talking about bulk ink systems. The cartridge system, everything's sealed up. So they're typically done in a very particular fashion where they are, when they're produced, I should say, they're typically produced. Maybe they're degassing the ink, they're filtering the ink, they have a special filling station, the bags are completely vacuumed, and when ink goes in there, the only thing in that bag is ink, and the only thing that stays in that bag forever is ink. It never touches air or oxygen again. There's no particulate involved. So the bagged or the cartridge systems, generally speaking, are known to be very, very reliable, very consistent, a little bit less on the maintenance, and great for print heads. And you're going to continue to see more and more cartridge systems come out with the direct-to-film systems too. So they're both great. Biggest benefit of bulk, lower cost. Biggest benefit of the cartridge and the bag systems is better reliability. In a very simple and short way. It's more complicated than that, but to simply put, that's where the conversation starts. The next part of the ink system that's really important is the white ink. And I'm going to assume that many of you know about white ink printing to some degree. It's been around for a while. Here at ColDesi, we've been printing with white ink with direct-to-garment systems for near 20 years now. And white ink is complicated. You need agitation and movement in that ink. And it's a complicated process. So higher end systems are going to have what we refer to as white ink circulation. Right. And white ink circulation is essentially moving the ink throughout the system. Right. So you can take a cartridge or a bottle and you can shake it and you can agitate that and get all of that particulate mixed back up in the ink. So it's not settled and you don't have, a bunch of gunk on the bottom of your system, your cartridge, or whatever it might be. But there's still white ink going throughout all the lines, through the dampers, through the print head. These are all different parts and pieces of your printer. And they will settle in there as well, right? So white ink circulation systems move ink around. So higher end systems are going to have that. If you don't have that, then typically they're going to move white ink through the system through a different way, which is basically just pushing it out the print head into the trash. So circulation systems are better for reliability. Circulation systems are less wasteful and overall make a better printer. And naturally, they're part of higher end systems because there's more parts and pieces and engineering to getting great white ink circulation. And then I made a call a little bit earlier to something calling about, integrated versus modular setups or all-in-one systems, I believe is exactly what I said. And what we're referring to there is quite simple. If you have an A3 or a letter-sized printer, what they've essentially engineered is they've taken some sort of a regular printer right? A regular desktop printer like you would have, at your house to print, paper. And they've converted a printer like that and put textile inks into it. So you literally are just printing on transfer paper, and that's all that happens in the printer. When you're done with that, you have to remove the transfer off, and you have to add the powder or the glue to the top. And this is literally done manually, either putting it in a tube or you're putting it in a bucket or a pan, shaking it and sprinkling and all that, and literally putting it on that. It's like arts and crafts. It's like doing glitter on top of glue when you were a kid. That's exactly what it's like. And then at the end, you've got this print that's got some glue stuck to the back of it. And then you need to cure that. And you usually are going to cure that in a heat press. That's probably the most common way. You literally put it under the heat press and you hover it, and it has to sit like that for a few minutes typically. That's how those are produced. As you can imagine, it's a manual process. It's a slow process. It's not ideal for production. Okay, it's really only good for small runs. So you figure you print, you shake, and then you bake, and that whole process could take, for really small printers, 10 minutes. For the whole thing to be done for one single transfer. And for maybe larger ones, it's could be half that speed, but it's still not particularly fast. Now, the next step up is going to be your integrated or your roll-to-roll systems. And what these are is you have a roll of blank transfer material film, and that's going through the printer. It's printing on the transfer. Then it's going through what's referred to as a shaker dryer, right? So it's, in so many words, shaking the powder or glue after it's being printed on. And then it puts it through a dryer, and the dryer is then making it into a finished, viable transfer. And then at the end of your printer, at the end of the dryer, there's another roller rolling through, and that's collecting all the completed transfers. Right. So there's no humans involved in this system at all, outside of making sure that it's running properly. You hit print, and the output is a transfer that's ready to be applied to a piece of apparel or textile or whatever you're putting the transfer on. So obviously it's a much more automated system, but also much more accurate system. You are getting the powder or the glue is being applied exactly the same way on every single transfer. When you're doing it by hand, you're going to get heavy spots and light spots. And if you've worked with those type of transfers and you've had some peel off or not feel very good or not be able to stretch or whatever it is, it's typically because not the right amount of adhesive was applied. And that's just the nature of it if you're doing it by hand. And then the other big issue with it is, for one, you're significantly slower, as I mentioned earlier. So that's a huge issue. The production slows down, you get uneven, and then just your general output, is not quite as nice. So there's a lot of different reasons why those manual systems are not preferred for production. But really the big thing is it's just about money, right? Some folks are looking to spend less, or they cannot spend enough to afford to get a roll-to-roll type of printer, and that puts them in a position where they're working with a sheet system. The only thing I would say the danger to watch out for is what I've seen a lot is with UV DTF. I've seen this with sublimation systems everywhere. If a system is too small and the production is too slow, it becomes a detriment to your business. So that's something that you really want to have a conversation with when you're talking with somebody about the direct to film printers. You want to ask them, how many can I produce in an hour? How much work is it from me? Right. Or if you have an employee, how much work is it from my staff actually hands on? So the roll to rolls obviously is very little work from the staff outside of somebody monitoring, usually one person. The hand applied is constant work for your staff. So now that we kind of understand size, we understand the different type of ink systems, and we talk about the integrated systems or not, that's kind of a good overall on the types of systems. Next, we'll dive more into some budget considerations, right? Because that's what we talked about before, is having a very fast roll-to-roll system is ideal. You get perfect transfers every time, but not everybody gets into that. Why, right? So it's because of money. Right. That's just quite frankly. So you've got your entry level setups. Your entry level setups are your desktop manual shaking, the shake and bake type of systems. The pros on that, it's cheap and you actually make a real direct to film transfer, which is a pro, right? You actually are making a direct to film transfer, which is fantastic, right? And that you could do it for pretty cheap. Now, the cons are, I have a few written down, but I thought of another one. The first con is typically those are just sold by online marketplaces and you're not going to get very good service or support. I might talk about more about that later, but that's one that is important to mention. It can take 6, 8, 10 minutes to make one single transfer, which is not production friendly at all. You're talking about being able to make 5 in an hour, 6 in an hour, 7, that's it. If you have an order of 100 shirts or even 50 shirts, that's an incredible amount of work. And what you're going to charge for those t-shirts is really not going to be enough to justify. So if you're doing small little one-offs, you're doing onesie twosies and fill-ins, extras, fixing mistakes, that's fine. But for production type of environment, you've got to do the math. So what I would just say is if you're considering buying something, because I was in equipment sales for a long time, and I know the thought process, right? The thought process is, well, I'm just getting started. I don't know how busy I'm going to be. I don't want to dump a lot of money. And so I'll start something small and then I'll upgrade it later, which is not a bad way of thinking, right? The problem is the small desktop type of printers. For one, let's go back to the ink type of stuff. For one, they typically don't have a circulation system in them. So they're more likely to break down because you have to do a lot of manual work to be able to keep that thing clean and prevent settling and all that stuff that's very, very important. Two, your output quality is not going to be the same as an automated system, right? So you're going to get some inconsistencies. You're going to be dissatisfied with some prints. You're more likely to make mistakes. You're more likely to have 8 minutes worth of work thrown in the trash. Or worse, you go to adhere it to a garment and it peels. It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right, or it washes off, washes really poorly at minimum. So that's kind of some of your cons right there, right? Just overall, it can be a more frustrating experience. And then in the end, you give up. You don't want to do it anymore. You're done with it, right? I'm just going to stick with sublimation. I'm just going to stick with doing stickers and signs. Why did I bother to do this t-shirt thing? Well, you also picked the most frustrating way to do it, right? So that's a huge cons for me. All right. And let's see. So what's my verdict on the really compact stuff? My personal opinion, I'm just me, but I just say get something else, right? If you want something as a backup, or you really want just like a onesie twosie thing for the side, I wouldn't necessarily be against that, but it should not be the way that you plan on really making money for your business. If you do want something less expensive to get started, then I would recommend you look at a white toner printing system like our digital heat effect system at ColDesi, or potentially look at just doing vinyl for t-shirts or sublimation. Right. And those all have their own pros and cons within them. However, all those systems are going to be a lot more reliable for you. The output's going to be significantly faster. The quality of the output is going to be very consistent. And the investment is probably going to be pretty close to the same for all those systems, depending. As I said, there's pros and cons, but you're going to be a lot happier. I rarely run into somebody who says, I just love having this little compact direct to film printer. Almost everybody says it's too much work, it's broken, or I'm ready to upgrade. Okay. So next we'll talk about your mid-tier ones. Now, the middle tier are going to be for startups or low production. And I'm actually going to talk about a sheet printer in here, right? So the larger A3 11 by 17 or larger size sheet fed printers, that means you're printing one sheet at a time. However, they are on a commercial type of size. All right. So typically these printers are going to be built from print engines that are a lot more robust. They may have white ink circulation built into them. All the things that were problems with the really desktop type of stuff that you bought from an online marketplace. So those are reasonable to invest in. The size is going to be compact. It's going to be desktop. The cost is usually going to be less expensive than other more automated systems. But some of the cons still remain. It's not automated. you are still doing part of the process manually, so you can end up with inconsistencies, and it's slower to produce, right? Because you got to do one step, then the next step, then the next step, all with your own hands or your staff's hands. Next, we'll talk about a compact roll-to-roll systems. At ColDesi, this would be like our 12H2 system, which is a 2-print head, 12-inch wide print, in so many words. And these are great startup type of systems, and this actually gets you into the real production world. For one, you're automated printing roll to roll, so you're getting the consistency, which is a huge pro. You're getting all the automation, which is a huge pro, and it's still pretty compact. If you go to coldesi.com and you take a look at our videos for the 12H2, you'll see when people are standing next to it, it's a pretty compact size printer. It fits in the corner of a room. It doesn't take up a lot of room, and you still get high production. So this is definitely a go-to, in my personal opinion, for getting started. If you're a startup and you're looking to do, not huge production, you still get a really good powerhouse sized equipment. You get the automation, you get the consistency, you get beautiful prints, and you have a system that's really just desirable in general. It's very, very popular because of the size of the equipment and the size of the investment, and it's fully automated. So huge in popularity. So my verdict on the mid-size is, if you are looking to do mid-size, you're a real business and you actually want to be able to do production. If you have that 100 shirt order, you want to be able to do it, in the morning, not over days like you would with a really compact one. You could do it in a morning, and everything that you're getting out of it, just huge value for the buck, and you'll be really happy that you chose to go that direction. Now, plenty of folks need more than that, right? Your business is to decide, you say, well, I don't want to print 100 in the morning. I want to print hundreds in the morning, right? I want to print thousands in a day potentially. And then at this point in time is where you start getting into your larger printers. These are your 24, 30-inch printers. You're printing 2, 3 up all at the same time throughout the printers. These are going to come with all the bells and whistles that you want. They're going to do things like they're going to have white ink circulation. The trays and parts and pieces are going to be heated up. You're going to be able to easily do maintenance. There's going to be some automated maintenance. You're going to have all of these things built into these fantastically engineered systems because these are designed for production. If you have a screen print shop now, or you're running vinyl or sublimation all day, every day, I'm going to recommend that you go with at least a 24-inch size. And then the variation on the 24-inch sizes are going to be how many print heads you have. The more print heads, the faster it prints. That's really just what it is. So at ColDesi, we have currently we have a 24H2, which is a 24-inch printer, 2-head. So it's going to be more production than the smaller compact 12-inch one. Then we have a 24H4, a 4-head, and then we have a 24H5, a 5-head. As you go up in the number of heads, you also are getting some upgrades in the printer as well in regards to maintenance and tons of other things. That's a conversation to have with a salesperson or an account manager here at ColDesi if you're kind of curious on the real differences. So let's talk about some of the pros. For one, actually, I got them all, right? So I'm checking my notes. We've got 24 plus inches, so you could do 1, 2, 3 up. You've got white ink circulation. You've got a fully automated system. You've got all the extra bells and whistles like heated trays and automatic tensioning and things to really help with production and keep things rolling. And it's designed for production. It's designed for return on investment. It's not just designed to print a transfer. Right? It's designed to print a transfer for a production-friendly environment. Okay? So it's really fantastic. The cons are kind of obvious. Nothing really bad about the printers, but for one, it's the largest amount of space. Right? You can imagine a printer that's doing that size, it's even wider. The length of the dryer is going to be longer. There's just more around it, so it's going to take up some more space. If you want to know how much space these are going to take, if you go to ColDesi and you chat with our team, you can actually, you can request a document from them. We'll break down all the different sizes for the different size of equipment that we sell. And generally speaking, I mean, I'm going to be very, very general here. If you are not sure which printer you're going to get or even who you're going to buy from, the documents that we have to help you determine the size are going to give you a pretty good idea for other types of manufacturers printers too, right? I mean, it's kind of like buying a sedan, right? If you're buying a 4-door sedan, you know about what size it is, whether you're getting a Nissan, a Toyota, Honda, a Ford, or Chevy. They're all relatively the same size. So you understand the size of a sedan or the size of a big pickup truck. So that'll be helpful for you. The investment's just larger, right? The faster you want to produce, the more engineering, the more parts, the more print heads, the more expensive they are to produce. So they're going to be a larger investment. Faster return on that investment for sure, but a larger investment indeed. There's also going to be the power requirements are going to start to change here. Right? Everything that we were speaking of up until we got to these, you are plugging into a regular wall outlet plug for the most part. Again, that's something you definitely want to check with whoever you're talking to. What are the electrical requirements? But your compact roll-to-roll and any desktop, you're just plugging that into a regular wall outlet for the most part. When you get to your larger roll-to-rolls and the larger dryers, this is where you're going to have larger electrical requirements, 220 type of voltage. If you're not familiar, just think about how your dryer plugs in, right? Versus how your washer or your microwave might plug in. Okay. So the big chunky ones, you got to get that electricity there. The good news is if you're a screen print shop or a large production shop now, you've probably got the electrical requirements from having other dryers or other types of large format type of printing equipment already. Again, the documentation that we have for size typically is going to include electrical requirements too. Okay, so what are some other things you're going to need to invest in, right? So you're talking about the printer, right? And a way to dry it. So now, if you get an all-in-one system, that's all together. If you buy just a really compact printer, you need a heat press or some other way to dry it. But in addition to that, heat presses are going to be the choke point of production at this point in time. Now, if you've got a 24 or 30 inch large printer and you're printing 100, 200, 300, 400 transfers per hour, depending on the size, then you can see where if it takes, let's just say 30 seconds to do the whole production process of adhering this to the garment, that's your choke point, is your heat presses. So you're going to really want to do the math on, how long is it going to take for each heat press and what's my output that I want to do? Because I know my printer can do, for the sake of argument, let's just say it's 200 transfers per hour, right? I know my printer can do that. Well, how many heat presses do I need to be able to keep up with that? Also, is that important at that time for your production? The great thing about direct to film compared to screen printing, as an example, as a direct comparison, is that you can produce your transfers and then you can do your application to apparel later, right? Where screen printing, it has to happen simultaneously. When we're doing transfer production, you could do your transfers and then you could do it later. So you don't necessarily have to have them keep up exactly unless you're doing full production all the time. But the equipment's running nonstop, then you're going to need enough heat presses to run it nonstop. Another piece of equipment you're going to need is what we would call an extractor. There's going to be some fumes that are created when you put things, especially into the tunnel dryers, and you're going to want to extract that out. At ColDesi, our larger systems, they have an extractor built in. If you're currently are compact roll to roll, you're going to use an external extractor. It's basically an air filter. I mean, that's in so many words. To keep it simple, it's an air filter. So you're going to want to check, does this printer and dryer combo have an extractor? If it doesn't, how large am I need to invest in one? What size? And what are the electrical requirements of that? So that's a really important part of the process that you're definitely going to want to discuss, is how are you going to handle extraction? You do not operate printers in an open air environment. And I'm going to talk about some reliability and maintenance and environmental conditions next. But before we do that, there are two other things that you need to consider. Of course, naturally, just your startup supplies, right? When you start to produce on this printer, how many prints do you plan on doing that first week, that first month, All right. Then you're going to want to talk to the representative you're working with and make sure that you're getting enough ink, film, and powder. Those are your three big things that you're getting. Typically CMYK ink, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and white. Those are typically the colors that you're working with and for most direct-to-film printers nowadays. And then you have your film. It's just essentially one type of film for everything. And then your powder or your glue or your adhesive. You want to make sure that you have enough of that. I'll tell you, I worked at the supply store here at ColDesi for years. And so often I would get a phone call in a panic. I need more ink. I need it as quick as possible. Can you get it? Can I get it tomorrow? How much is it going to cost to overnight it? When they didn't actually consider how much ink they would need for that first production runs that they were going to be doing. They just bought their printer and they didn't want to be upsold by the salesperson, right? I mean, that's our defense mechanism that we all have. I don't want to be upsold. I don't need the extras. But when it comes to ink, powder, and film, these are consumables that you're going to use. Just make sure you have enough, right? It's not about being upsold at that point in time. It's you're going to buy it and you don't want to be in a position where you have to spend $150, $200, $300 to, overnight airmail, a roll of film. That's, if you're listening, you don't see my hands, but they're big. They're big rolls of film. A 24-inch roll of film is big and heavy and expensive to overnight. Okay. And then the last thing to consider for investing, I would say, is what we've referred to as an emergency kit. And what I mean by that are there are certain parts and pieces of your printer that eventually will wear out or go bad or are likely to cause some problems. All right. And this could be something that like that we call like dampers. There's little parts and pieces that are important. And it's great to have these little parts and pieces available right next to your printer. Like how beautiful is your printer's not printing the way you wanted to. One of the wear and tear parts has gone bad. And then now you have to buy one. Right? Which means you're either paying for overnight delivery or waiting a few days, and you could be completely out of production or partially in production. So this is the same as just you have your food stores at home, right? Like you always have the typical things that you and your family eat, right? Like you always have rice or you always have pasta, you always have salt and pepper. These are things that you're going to always want to have these extra little things for your printer. So that's in addition to the ink. These are not required to have. This is for emergency purposes. Normally what's going to happen is you're going to say, I'm doing my annual maintenance. I'm going to go ahead and replace X, Y, and Z. I'm going to replace this filter. I'm going to replace these dampers. And then you just order them and they come in a week later, whatever, and you replace them a week after that, right? No big deal. Unlike changing the air filter in your car or in your AC at home. This is for when it breaks. It doesn't work. And just like everything else, you can have failures, whether it's your fault or it just happens. The universe just happened to you. So having an emergency kit is great. What I would recommend is talking to whoever you're talking to when you're investing and say, hey, tell me about an emergency kit. What are some parts and pieces that I'm going to wish I had in stock just in case something happens? And they can recommend a handful of things for you to purchase. Okay, so next, a bit about reliability and maintenance. That's a huge question everyone always asks. My print head's going to clog, right? It's going to break. It's only going to last 6 months. All these horror stories that they've heard. And I'm going to tell you why, almost having seen and talked to so many people and having seen so many tickets opened in our support system, having had tons of customers I've worked with directly in sales and people I've worked with over the phone in supplies, I could tell you like 99% of the problems are just these handful of things. Number one, follow the manufacturer's guidelines for maintenance. That's a pause there on purpose. So that's it, right? I don't even want to explain it any further. Do that. If they say spin something 3 times and tap it twice, do it exactly that. Don't spin it 4 times and tap it 3 or 1, 2. Do exactly that. They've chosen those guidelines for a reason. Some folks will kind of get skeptical, like, oh, they're telling me to use this cleaner. It's just because they want to sell me this cleaner. I'm telling you that nobody in this business who's selling cleaning fluids is staying in business because you're buying a little 4-ounce bottle of cleaning fluid every like 6 months, right? Like that's not what's keeping anybody in business. You being up and running, you producing, buying more printers, telling other people to hey, buy your equipment from ColDesi, it's great. You buying more ink, that's what is producing profits for businesses that sell print, right? So if they're telling you to use little sponges or they recommend a particular cloth that they sell on their website, there's a piece and part of all of us that are saying, I'm not going to spend $10 on these little cloths. I'll just go buy something from, Walmart. Well, there might be a reason why they chose that cloth, whether it's how quickly it absorbs liquid, whether it's lint free, whether it's free of static. There's all these materials and pieces that engineers pick for doing maintenance, whether it's liquids or little cloths. They've chose these things for a reason, right? And it's not because they're going to get rich on selling like a $7 cloth. So anyway, just follow the guidelines. What I would say is almost everybody who follows the guidelines for the T is really happy. The folks who cuts corners are usually the ones that have a problem. Okay, hopefully I've beat that in enough. It's really important whether you get it from ColDesi or not, whoever you're investing in equipment in, be sure to follow the manufacturer's guidelines on maintenance. The next big thing that's an issue is temperature. Printers, and especially when you're talking about textile inks, the viscosity of the ink is very important. The temperature around it can affect that. If it's freezing, the ink in your printer is going to freeze, right? I know that sounds so simple, but we've had maintenance calls where, hey, what's the temperature in your shop? Oh, it's winter here and we got the doors open. It's freezing in here. It's like 40 degrees. Well, no wonder your printer's angry. So are you, right? You're wearing a jacket, aren't you? Your printer wishes it had a jacket on. So temperature about 60 to 80 degrees is a normal for these type of direct-to-film textile printers. If you're comfortable, your printer's comfortable. That's kind of a phrase people say. Same for humidity, right? 50 to 70% humidity is great. The reason why humidity is so important is as it's printing, right? If the humidity is really, really low, I mean, we all know this, right? And if you've lived in different areas or visited and experienced it, you'll know this in real life. But if you've been to Arizona in the summer, right, it'll be 95 degrees, humidity super low. You almost never don't feel like you sweat, right? It's like your shirt never gets soaked. The humidity is really low. The air is sucking up all that moisture. So you are sweating and it's evaporating off you almost instantly, right? Now you flip that. Go to the tropics, go to Florida, where I am, and it's 95 degrees out, super high humidity, and it's just like the sweat is just dripping. Nothing is getting off of you, right? There's already too much moisture in the air for it to suck it off you, to evaporate off you. The same happens in your print head, okay? So if it's really, really low humidity, as these micro droplets are being spit out of the print head, that stuff's actually evaporating, right? And in the system, right? The world, the universe wants balance and everything, right? Osmosis and all these things, right? I mean, transfer of heat, right? We have all learned these things in school, and balance is everything. So if you have a really low humidity environment, it's going to affect the liquids in your printer. Okay. So huge problem that will cause you print issues, performance issues, print head issues, everything. So maintain your temperature, maintain your humidity. And also, yeah, but I've had XYZ printer for 10 years and I just run that printer with the shop door open. It's no problem. Well, it's probably not a direct to film printer, right? It's a different type of printer. It uses a different ink. It reacts with the environment differently. So this is really important. And by the way, if you have a DTG printer or you're thinking about getting one of those, the same rules apply. If you have a UV printer, the same rules apply. And not every printer is the same, right? So follow the manufacturer's guidelines on that. If your manufacturer says 50 to 60%, do that. I'm just giving you kind of a rule of thumb. And then next we'll talk about some common failure points. Right. The number one that everyone, worries about. I needed a sip of my coffee here for a moment, but is the print head, right? The print head is where the ink jets out of. That's where the ink shoots out of to produce your images. And different types of ink are more sensitive to print heads. As I mentioned before, white ink is a very on the end of the spectrum of being sensitive inside print heads. And then maybe like eco solvent ink or something is on like another side, right? Or like your desktop paper printer at home is on like the other side, right? Not really a lot of drama for something like that. Maybe eco solvents a little more, maybe sublimations a little more, maybe color textile inks a little more, and then white ink is going to be your most sensitive. So if you, again, just going to go back to it. If you follow the manufacturer's guidelines on how to properly take care of your print head, you're not going to have problems with it. Then there is other things like we talked about circulation systems. There's things like wet capping systems. And that's something that we have in our highest end printer. Or it's an automatic system that when the print head parks or caps, it caps it in a wet way. I'm just trying to explain this without getting into the weeds too much. It caps it in a way where the print head stays safe all the time. I met with one of our engineers and I had like a mind blow experience where he said, yeah, that new capping system we have there. Yeah. Tell me about it. He said, we had that printer in the back of the warehouse for 2 months, turned it on, first test, perfect. And everyone's like, what? So cool. Like, so no maintenance, no drama between it, sitting for months. I thought that was awesome. Engineers might get upset that I said I would not recommend just letting printers sit forever. That's a danger zone for printers. But the purpose of that example is that higher end systems are built to prevent that. And the cheaper a system is, the less there is safety built into it for you, right? The more work you have to do. It's not just about you shaking and baking more work. It's also maintenance more work too. Okay. All right. So next we'll talk about where to buy and some things to avoid. And then we'll finish off with some tips for beginners and pros, which I may have touched on some of those already, but I'll make sure I hit them. And then we'll wrap up today's episode. So where to buy and what to avoid. Okay. For one, just if you can trust a brand, then you probably can feel pretty good about trusting the printer that they offer, right? So if they've been around a while, if they have a large support department, if they have locations and techs in different areas, I mean, these are all signals of an organization that has a lot of printers out in the field, a lot of experience. They've heard all the problems. They've engineered to fix those problems, hopefully, and you're more than likely to benefit from all of that work done by the rest of the crowd, right? And that's true for everything else, right? There's a reason why Toyota is famous, for their Corolla and their Camry as a great car. The brand's trusted. People know that they can go buy that car. It's probably going to last a long time. Ford trucks, another famous one. So next, key questions to ask vendors before you buy. Okay. I'll just write these down and just ask them, go through the line. So how long have you been in business? Right? It doesn't need to be a tricky answer. It should just be pretty simple. How long have they been around? How long have they been selling direct to film printers? That technology is fairly new. So what other printers have they sold before that? Did they sell direct to garment printers before that? Have they sold sublimation printers, white toner printers? Do they have printer experience for a long time? If they do, their technicians will have a lot of experience. More experience means they've heard your problem before, which means they know the answer. That's pretty simple. What's the warranty? Very important. What's the warranty? What's included in the warranty? How many printers or customers do you have out there? There's something really powerful about the crowdsourcing of knowledge. When a business has hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of customers, they've gotten a lot of phone calls. They've seen a lot of the problems. They've resolved a lot of issues. And there's some power for you, right? You're not going to be the first person to have run into this. Chances are you're not, which is great. So how many customers do they have? And how does that make you feel? Can I see a sample? Huge. Get a sample of something for sure, whether you need it to be custom or it can be, just like a cookie cutter sample that they can quickly send out to you. A sample is important. And can we do a live or virtual demo? So can you go in the office or can you do something on a webcam? Both are fine, but this gives you the opportunity to see the workflow, give you a good feeling for the company, for the printer, how it looks, how they react to your questions. And also the virtual demo always creates a lot of great questions. I've seen and been a part of so many of them. And when I'm on the phone, or I see people on the phone, we get some pretty good questions, right? And they're getting answered. But when people see it printing and they see the process, then, I mean, the juices are flowing in the head, right? And tons of great questions. So it's not only a great exercise for evaluating who you're going to purchase from, it's a great exercise for you, because you are going to think of more things to ask and make yourself get a better educated decision. Okay. And next is we'll talk a little bit about evaluating those test prints, right? So you're going to request a sample. You're going to get one in the mail. A few simple things to do. A lot of this goes without speaking, but it's important to mention. For one, feel it, stretch it, wear it if you can, or have somebody else wear it, wash it. These are all important things to get an experience for. Now, what's going to happen is if you screen print or you do vinyl or sublimation, you're going to immediately be comparing it directly with that technology. And you already know the things that you love about your screen print shirts or your sublimation shirts, and you're going to be comparing it. And our natural inclination is to look for the negatives in that. Oh, it's not as vibrant, or it's not as soft, or it's, whatever it's not as, you're going to feel it's not as. So a way to get past that is to do some customer reviews or do little mini focus groups with people. So what I would do is take a sample and bring it to one of your customers, or bring it to a potential customer, or to just strangers, friends of family, and say, hey, what do you think about this shirt? How's it look, feel? I love it. Yeah, it's great. So all your little things that you're breaking apart in your head because it's not what you're used to can help go away if you get a lot of great feedback from people. So that's another way to evaluate things that doesn't necessarily knock you out because of the notions that you've already got in your head, right? So there's some things that you're used to. Okay, so we've covered a lot in there. Hopefully there's been a lot of education for everybody so far. Hopefully you're headed in the right direction for choosing a direct-to-film printer. And hopefully you visit ColDesi.com and you chat with one of our pros and give one of our people a shot at talking to you about our printers, or seeing samples, or doing a live demonstration, or whatever it might be. Also, be sure to ask about the documentation, the readiness for your site. That'll tell you about electricity and size, give you a good idea of where it would fit into your shop. And then now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll talk about just a couple of tips that I've put together, one for beginners and one for pros, so we can go through these quickly, right? So for beginners, what are you going to look for in your first printer? Support, very, very important. Learning resources, training, very, very important. And how does the printer actually work? This tip is actually for pros too in that last one. I'll combine it together. If somebody tells you, yeah, you just turn it on, you hit print, and then you go and you make shirts and done, they're not being completely genuine with you, right? Textile printing, there's things you have to learn. You have to understand how the ovens operate, understand the circulation system of the ink. There are lots of little things to learn, not just about the equipment operation, but how to get the output you desire, how to match colors properly, how to prep your artwork properly. So there's a lot of little things to learn that some you may already know if you've been in the business for a while, some might be new to you, but it's really important to understand that it's a reasonably complex process, but that's why people make a lot of money doing it, right? If it was super, super easy and super cheap to do, then just literally everybody would do it on their own, but they don't. Because it takes some knowledge, it takes some know-how, it takes some practice, and you're going to want to have somebody to back you up. So if you buy something online and you don't have people you can call and email and video chat with, you are going to be pounding your fist one day, without an answer until you finally get it. And hopefully you didn't lose the job. Okay. I kind of wrote this one. It was funny to me, but it's serious too. Avoid shiny object syndrome. If something is brand new, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should get. If something looks really interesting or cool, or the color is really cool. Wow, look how bright red that is. Something like that, bright yellow. I'm not picking on anybody particular. I'm just making stuff up, but watch out for that. Just because the shape of the outside is really cool doesn't mean that the guts on the inside are great. So it's really important to focus on reliability, the reputation of who you're buying from, and all the other things I talked about earlier when you're evaluating a company. Look for your starter kits and bundles for sure. You don't want to just buy a printer. We talked about the upselling before. You want to make sure you get everything you need to be successful in that first round, because the most disappointing thing that I've seen so many times, especially with online purchases, somebody buys a printer and then they get it and they've got no paper, no film, no ink, no t-shirts, no way to get artwork done. So make sure you got the full kit and caboodle, right? Definitely watch out for too good to be true. If something seems like it's really, really cheap and really, really great and it checks everything off, naturally watch out that you're not being taken. So look for how equipment is supported, look for reviews from the company. Very, very important. And the last little bit is, especially if you're getting started or you're looking to grow this business, you're going to be happier if you've slightly overinvested than if you underinvested. And I talked about the frustrations earlier, right? Took too long to do, too many headaches, you give up, right? Versus, wow, this job was done already. What am I going to do with the next 6 hours of my day? Well, you get out there and you sell more shirts, right? So you're better off to slightly overinvest than you are to underinvest when you're purchasing commercial equipment, especially if you want to start a business. All right. So some tips for the pros out there. If you're ready in the industry, if you've been printing for a while, if you already have a shop, you have employees, all this stuff, what are some things that you're going to want to do? So when you're looking to purchase this equipment, if you've already procured and purchased equipment before, this, but buy for your production expectations plus expecting some growth. So if you need to produce 100 shirts an hour, I wouldn't recommend buying the transfer printer that prints 100 an hour, right? That gives you no room for growth. You're stuck immediately. And the goal hopefully is you're investing in new technology, makes customers happier, you grow, you have more customers, or you start moving other technology around. I'm using the vinyl less, so let's move that over to the direct-to-film printer. Well, if the direct-to-film printer is already at max capacity, there's no moving. So you're going to want to invest in expectations plus growth. One thing is, assume that you won't stop using other print technologies, right? So you'll probably still screen print, you'll probably still do some vinyl, you'll probably still do some sublimation, but definitely expect to replace more than you anticipate, because that's super common, right? Is that, for one, your customers are probably going to like it a lot. It's going to be less work for your staff. They're going to like not making a mess or not dealing with this, not dealing with that. And so expect technology to roll over. When I've interviewed and talked to a lot of different people, I hear the same story. When we first started, we were doing about 20% of our production on our direct-to-film printer. Now, a year later, we're doing 75% of our production. And by next year, we'll probably do 90% of our production. We're only going to use our screen print or whatever else it might be for certain specialty types of jobs. Because when you start doing something that's easier, that has a great output, that your customers are happy with, that's low cost, all these things coming together, you're going to want to use it more. So just be prepared for that and make sure you're investing in the right type of equipment for speed and production for that. Next would be to set some client expectations. We had a client that purchased a direct-to-film printer, right, versus an older piece of technology. They loved the output, like floored by it, loved it. Every employee there loved it. They're so much better than the old way we were doing it. The colors are brighter, it feels better, it washes better. And then one day, they started buying the consumable supplies for the older technology again. So what's going on? Well, our largest client did not approve our changeover. And even though they like it better, their corporate policy, it still has to be approved for change. So they had to go through like a 30-day, 60-day period of getting corporate approval on this new technology. So I would just check if you have big clients. Hey, do you have any policy if I change technology? I've got something that's better. It's going to produce better shirts for you. Is that okay? And see if there's any hiccups there. Show them samples if they need it, right? If you have specific colors you work with, talk to whoever you're dealing with in your direct-to-film printer and say, hey, how can I print that color? Send a sample if you need, whatever it is. A good, reputable company will be able to help you achieve the right colors. And also, some of your clients are just not going to be that picky, just quite frankly. Some of them are super picky, some are not. Others, you're going to look at the colors and you're like, close, I don't know. And then you show it to them, and I love it. Great. Thanks. And that's the end of it. So don't assume anything. Talk to your clients about what you're going to be printing. And then the last little bit is if you're doing spot type of colors right now, so if you're doing vinyl or screen printing and you're typically trying to limit your customers to 1, 2, 3, 4 colors, now that you can do digital, upsell that. Sell more colors. Once you get your customer used to doing 10, 12, 20, 40, 100 colors in their artwork, it's going to be harder for somebody to take that business from you, especially if they're only doing spot color type of printing or vinyl or something like that. Okay. And then the last little bit is going to be a positive thing, right? Training your staff is going to be much easier on this equipment versus doing, say, screen printing as an example. There's a lot less steps. The equipment's doing most of the work for you. So that's a huge win, but just understand and explain to them and whoever you work with that the process is now going to be different. Right? Just you're going to be spending a lot less time pushing ink, but you're going to be spending maybe more time, testing the process and doing maintenance, things like that. Right? So make sure all those expectations are set and make sure everybody understands the manufacturer's guidelines for maintenance. That's the most important part of your training. So if you have training that comes with your printer, I would have everybody take it. I would have checklists of all the processes. So the workload's going to be less, but it's going to be different. Make sure that your staff is fully trained up. Well, we spent an hour together talking about choosing the right direct-to-film printer. I hope that you've learned some things today. Be sure to go to ColDesi.com and check us out. If you feel like you learned something good, definitely check us out. There's plenty more to learn, and we barely scratched the surface, but direct-to-film technology for apparel decorating is really fantastic. It's one of my favorite things out there. If you're not doing it yet, you're absolutely going to fall in love with it once you get used to it. It's just a matter of making sure you choose the right printer for your needs. So thank you for listening to CAS podcast here at ColDesi, and have a good business.